The scent of rain-soaked earth and old paper filled the attic, a comforting perfume that always made 12-year-old Finn feel like he was stepping into another time. Dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight slanting from a high, round window, illuminating a landscape of forgotten treasures and family ghosts. Finn, however, wasn't on a treasure hunt. He was hiding. His hiding place was a small nook behind a stack of his father's old university textbooks, and the monster he was hiding from was a pristine, white sheet of drawing paper currently lying on the small wooden desk across the room. Next to it sat a box of brand new charcoal pencils, their sharpened points looking as sharp and intimidating as a dragon's teeth. It had been a week since the notice for the annual town art fair had been posted. And for a week, Finn had been locked in a silent, agonizing battle with the blank page. He wanted, more than anything, to draw the old lighthouse that stood on Gull Point, a craggy finger of rock that jutted out into the sea. He could see it perfectly in his mind, the way the waves crashed against its base, sending plumes of white spray into the air, the stoic, weathered texture of its stone, the single, watchful eye of its lamp. In his head, it was a masterpiece. But the moment he picked up a pencil, a cold dread washed over him. His hand would freeze just above the paper. What if the lines were crooked? What if the shading was all wrong? What if the magnificent image in his mind came out on the paper as a clumsy, childish scribble? The thought of that failure, of the gap between his vision and his ability, was a chasm too wide and too terrifying to cross. So the paper remained untouched, a perfect, silent accusation. The floorboards creaked behind him, and Finn didn't have to look to know who it was. No one else moved with that quiet, deliberate grace. His older sister, Elara. "The paper is winning, I see," she said softly. Her voice was like the low, melodic notes of a cello. Finn didn't move from his hiding spot. "It's not a fight," he mumbled into his knees. "Isn't it?" Elara's shadow fell over him as she knelt down. She was 17 and possessed a calm that seemed ancient to Finn. She was an artist herself, but her art was different. She worked with clay, her hands always faintly dusty, her fingernails rimmed with the earth. Her potter's wheel and kiln were in the garage, her own sacred space. "It's just, I don't want to ruin it," Finn confessed, the words barely a whisper. "It's so much better in my head." Elara was silent for a moment. Finn could feel her thinking. "I know that feeling," she said finally. "The fear of the first mark. Come on. I want to show you something." She didn't wait for an answer, just stood and walked towards the stairs. Reluctantly, Finn uncurled himself and followed her down from the attic, through the quiet house and into the cool, concrete space of the garage. The garage smelled of clay and ozone from the kiln. Shelves were lined with her creation's elegant vases, whimsical mugs shaped like sleeping foxes, and smooth, round bowls glazed in the colors of the sea and sky. But Elara didn't lead him to these finished pieces. She went to a small table in the corner, a place Finn thought of as her hospital for broken things. On the table lay the patient, a beautiful porcelain bowl, now in several large, jagged pieces. It had been one of her finest works, glazed in a deep cobalt blue swirled with veins of white. Finn remembered the day it had been dropped. The sharp, shattering sound had felt like a tragedy. "I was so angry when this broke," Elara said, running a finger along a sharp, fractured edge. "I almost threw it all away. Felt ruined. Useless. A failure." Finn nodded. That was exactly how he felt about the drawing he hadn't even started. The potential for it to become a failure was so strong it already felt broken. Elara then picked up a small tray. On it were several tubes of what looked like glue, a tiny brush, and a small pot filled with a fine, shimmering gold powder. But then I remembered, she said, her eyes lighting up with a quiet passion, that sometimes things are more beautiful for having been broken. She carefully applied a thin line of lacquer to the edge of one of the broken pieces. Then, with the delicate touch of a surgeon, she dipped her brush into the gold powder and dusted it over the sticky lacquer. She fitted the piece against another, pressing them together firmly. A brilliant golden seam now held the two fragments of the broken bowl together. It's a Japanese art form called Kintsugi, she explained, her focus entirely on her work. It means golden joinery. The philosophy behind it is that when something has been damaged, it has a history. Instead of hiding the cracks, you highlight them. You make them part of the story. The breaks aren't something to be ashamed of. They're proof that it has lived, that it is healed. Finn watched mesmerized. She continued her patient work, piece by piece, joining the broken porcelain with veins of shimmering gold. The bowl was slowly coming back together, but it wasn't the same as it was before. Cracks weren't gone. They were transformed, turned into a beautiful, intricate map of its own history. The random, ugly fractures had become a deliberate, stunning design. The bowl wasn't just repaired, it was reborn, more unique and precious than it had been in its original perfect state. We're like that too, I think, Elara said, not looking up. Our mistakes, our failures, they don't have to be the end. They can be the most interesting parts of us. They're how we learn. You can't create a golden seam without a crack first. She placed the last piece into place and held the bowl up. The light from the garage window caught the intricate network of gold lines, making them glow. It was breathtakingly beautiful. The paper in the attic, Finn, she said, finally looking at him. It's not your enemy. And a crooked line isn't a failure. It's just a crack. It's a place where you can learn. It's part of the story of your drawing. Maybe you can even turn it into something beautiful. That night, Finn lay in bed, the image of the golden bowl shimmering in his mind. He thought about the lighthouse, standing against the storms, getting battered by wind and waves year after year. It wasn't perfect. It was covered in cracks and patches, stained by salt and time. And that was what made it beautiful. Its imperfections told its story. The next morning, he didn't hide. He walked straight up to the attic, sat at the desk, and picked up a charcoal pencil. He took a deep breath, and without letting himself think, he drew the first line. It was crooked. The old panic flared in his chest, hot and sharp. He wanted to crumple the paper, to throw it away and pretend it never happened. But then he thought of Elara's hands, patiently tracing a fracture with gold. You can't create a golden seam without a crack first. He looked at the crooked line. It wasn't right for the straight, proud edge of the lighthouse tower. But it did look a bit like the jagged edge of a rock. Instead of erasing it, he changed his plan. He started with the rocks at the base of the lighthouse, letting his hand be looser, freer. He drew the chaotic, crashing waves, and the crooked lines and smudges that would have horrified him yesterday suddenly became the perfect texture for the seafoam and the weathered stone. He worked all day and all the next. He made hundreds of mistakes. He smudged the sky and had to work the gray cloudiness into a coming storm. He made one side of the lighthouse too wide and had to add shading and texture to give it the illusion of depth. Each crack forced him to find a creative solution. He was not just drawing the lighthouse, he was healing the drawing, filling in the cracks with new ideas. When he was finally finished, he propped the drawing up on the desk and stepped back. It wasn't the perfect, photorealistic image he had held in his mind. It was something else entirely. It was messy, dramatic, and full of a wild energy. The lines weren't perfect, but they were powerful. You could almost smell the salt and feel the spray. It was his story of the lighthouse, full of its own golden seams. He entered it into the art fair. He didn't win first prize. Technically flawless watercolor of the town square took that honor. But during the exhibition, a quiet elderly man stood in front of his drawing for a very long time. "This one," the man said to his wife, his voice full of feeling. "This one has soul. You can feel the wind." Finn, standing nearby, felt a warmth spread through his chest that was better than any blue ribbon. He saw Elara cross the crowded room and she gave him a small, proud nod. He understood then that the goal wasn't to be perfect. The goal was to be brave enough to make the first mark and the second and the third. The goal was to show up, to try, and to have the courage to turn your cracks into gold. The blank page never seemed like a monster again. It was just a beginning, an invitation to tell a story, complete with all of its beautiful, glorious imperfections. This story teaches us that our flaws and mistakes are not endings, but opportunities for growth and beauty. True strength lies not in avoiding failure, but in having the courage to mend what is broken and learn from the experience. By embracing our imperfections, we can create something more unique, resilient, and meaningful than if we had never faltered at all.